Governor Dukakis, Kitty Dukakis, Professor Iatridis, dear guests, I'm really honored, privileged, excited about being here today. It doesn't happen oftentimes that a dean can say hello and farewell to someone who was a faculty member for 46 years. Many of you were not born when Professor Iatridis published his first articles. His records, his academic achievements, my associate dean will tell you more about it after the talk that the governor will provide to us. But I should say on this day, the Veterans Day, we should also remember that Professor Iatridis was a veteran, is a veteran himself. He served between 41 and 46 for the Greek Air Force in the Middle East. The 46 years in a school that is 76 years old, that's 60% of the time he covered. It's just, these are numbers that, you know, are a little bit beyond our imagination. I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Really delighted when Professor Iatridis suggested that we invite Governor Dukakis. It really didn't take a millisecond to say, absolutely. Didn't know how we pull it off, but somehow we were able to do it. Many of you know, of course, of all his accomplishments, but let me just summarize a few of them. We are very proud that Michael Stanley Dukakis was born in Brookline, Massachusetts. His parents emigrated from Greece. In 1955, he graduated from Swarthmore College, and in 1960 from Harvard Law School. Again, Veterans Day, Governor Dukakis served from 1955 through 1957 in the United States Army stationed in Korea. He was elected chairman of Brookline's Democratic Organization in 1960 and won a seat in the Massachusetts legislature in 1962. He served 4 terms as a legislator, winning re-election by an increasing margin each time he ran. He won his party's nomination for governor in 1974 and beat the incumbent, Francis Sargent, decisively in November of that year. He inherited, that sounds pretty familiar, a record deficit and a record high unemployment, and is credited with digging Massachusetts out of one of its worst financial and economic crises in history. But the effort took its toll, and he was defeated in the Democratic primary in 1978 by Edward King. However, he came back to defeat King in 1982 and was re-elected to an unprecedented third 4-year term in 1986 by one of the largest margins in history. In 1986, his colleagues in the National Governors Association voted him the most effective governor in the nation. He was credited with the Massachusetts miracle. This country needs a miracle. He did it. He won the Democratic nomination for the presidency of the United States in 1988, was defeated by George Bush Sr. Soon thereafter, he announced that he would not be a candidate for re-election as governor. Since June of 1999, Dukakis has been a distinguished professor of political science at Northeastern University. Additionally, since 1995, and only the best can do that, he has served as a visiting professor at UCLA's School of Public Affairs, where the winter is much nicer than here. His research has focused on national healthcare policy reform and the lessons that national policymakers can learn from state reform efforts. He and the late US Senator Paul Simon authored a really interesting book that I strongly encourage, How to Get Into Politics and Why, which is designed to encourage young people to think seriously about politics and public service as a career. In 1998, President Clinton nominated Dukakis as a member of the new board of directors of Amtrak, and he served a full 5-year term on the board as vice chairman. Kitty and Mike Dukakis have 3 children, John, Andrea, and Kara, and are the proud grandparents of 8 grandchildren, if it's still accurate, I'm not sure, 6 girls and 2 boys. Governor Dukakis, we very much look forward to your talk. Thank you.
We love our grandchildren, but I think 8's going to be it. I think 8's going to be it. You know, I owe you all an apology. If I'd beaten Bush 1, you'd have never heard of Bush 2. We wouldn't be in this mess, and life would be beautiful. So blame me. Blame me. It's a delight for Kitty and me to be here. Incidentally, although she's hobbling around with a busted ankle, she's still the best-looking Medicare recipient in America, so I think you'll agree. And she's about to celebrate her 76th birthday. Why am I here? Well, because I have enormous respect for this guy, and in any event, he's Greek. I was about to start by saying, you know, and so on and so, but you wouldn't know what I was talking about. There are some people here who know. And I've been designated as a keynote speaker. Now, that's a dangerous thing to do to a retired politician. I mean, you know, you may never get me off this platform. So I'm going to try to be reasonably brief. I remember once, Dimitri, I was emceeing the ceremony at the end of the Greek Independence Day parade in Boston. And it was at that balcony in the Boston City Hall, you know, that thing that kind of overlooks the plaza. There were thousands of people there. And they must have had 8 scheduled speakers. And if you know anything about the Greeks, another 20 people came up to me saying, Monuligaki, you know, I just want to talk. I mean, they all wanted to talk. So I really put and I finally turned to somebody next to me and I said, how do you say short and sweet in Greek? He said, Liga ke kala. Anyway, a few words and good ones, so I'll try to do that. But after all, I'm the keynote speaker, so I got to talk about something. And what I want to talk about for a few brief minutes, I mean, you're going to be blessed with a panel with my dear friend and colleague, Barry Bluestone, who spent some time here before going to UMass Boston and is now graced us with his presence and his leadership at, if you'll pardon the expression, the Dukakis Center at Northeastern University. God, when they start naming things for you folks, you know you're on your way out, so, you know. But this was to some extent triggered by Paul Krugman's column today in the New York Times. I hate the word entitlements. I don't know where it came from. It ought to be stripped from our vocabulary. Entitlements. What are these folks talking about? Got to do something about entitlements. Who was it? Eric Cantor the other day said entitlement reform has got to be part of this grand bargain or whatever it is. This is Medicare and Social Security. This is the way we guarantee a very, very, very modest basic income for people in this country that have worked hard, contributed handsomely to the system, or are chronically and severely disabled. That's what Social Security is, folks. And Medicare, fortunately for those of us 65 and older, although now they're talking about moving the age up, Medicare is the way we provide decent, comprehensive health care to people 65 and older and people who are chronically and severely disabled. And these are entitlements. I'm sorry, I don't like the term. This is social insurance. That's what it is. And it's the way we try to respond to the needs of those of us who either have severe and chronic disabilities or have worked hard, have contributed, by the way, through payroll taxes. You know this business about how 45, 47% of the country doesn't pay income taxes? They're paying income taxes, folks. except we call it a payroll tax. And it's a very unfair and regressive income tax. Why? Well, for one thing, it doesn't apply to interest, dividends, and capital gains. And needless to say, the folks that make their money from those things tend to be, if not in the top 1%, in the top 5%. And secondly, it's capped at $116,000. So if you're a millionaire, you only pay a payroll tax on your first $116,000. Your effective rate is about 1/10 of the average American's. And of course, you pay nothing on your income, which is reflected in dividends, interest, and capital gains. So the folks that are benefiting, if I may say, from Social Security and Medicare, not only are people who I think most Americans believe should have some basic income and health security in their golden years, but have contributed in a way which is disproportionately unfair to them in relation to those who make more. And the payroll tax, in point of fact, outrageously violates the principle of the ability to pay. These are contributory systems. They're not handouts to anybody. And they're entitlements. Sorry. Sorry, I don't buy that. I think we ought to start referring to them as they are. This is social insurance to which they have contributed substantially in the course of their working lives. And as we begin now to deal with this fiscal cliff, or whatever it is, whose importance, by the way, in my judgment, is wildly exaggerated. I don't mean that not doing anything about it would be a good thing, but it shouldn't take much for the Congress of the United States in a bipartisan way to deal with it. Barry may want to talk about that later in the context of the kind of growing income inequality that we're experiencing in this country every day and every year. And I think one of the things that all of us, by the way, I'm wearing my Obama tie in honor of our guest of honor here. Wasn't Tuesday wonderful? Oh. Katie just had a nice chat with Elizabeth Warren a few hours ago. One of the reasons she's hurting a little bit is because she was out knocking on doors in Quincy with that foolish thing on her leg and persuading a few more people to vote. But I do think it's time we got this word out of our lexicon, frankly, because I think it's highly inaccurate, it's distorting, and it doesn't accurately describe what Medicare and Social Security are designed to do, and in point of fact, do. Now, there have been some people who have suggested, as you know, we've raised the retirement age gradually, a few years. I don't have a problem with that as life expectancy grows. And believe me, Social Security isn't bankrupt. It's not going to be bankrupt. A few modest changes in Social Security will guarantee the health of the program for the next 50 to 75 years. And even in the case of Medicare, where we do have some serious fiscal problems, although the fiscal integrity of the Medicare system has been substantially strengthened by the Affordable Care Act. Something to bear in mind. Repealing the Affordable Care Act would have brought us right up against serious Medicare financial problems within a year or two, or three, but it's not the case, thanks to the Affordable Care Act. But it's not just a matter of equity, folks. These two very important programs serve as part of the floor under our economy, built-in stabilizers, the economists call them, which ensures that even in the case of recession, we don't drop right through the floor. And they're very important in that respect. So on the occasion of the retirement of our dear friend, who's done such great work, and by the way, my hat's off to you in connection with Cuba. I think after 53 years, or whatever it is, we may just see a change in American policy on Cuba. Of course, it's been hugely successful, as all of us know. It's brought down Castro, right? if you want democracy in Cuba, send 10,000 American business people over there and have them climb all over the island and pretty soon and lift the travel restrictions and send us all down there. It's wonderful. It's terrific. Of course, they need some help. 5 buildings a week are collapsing in Havana every week. But if ever there was a failed policy, that's it. I see a ray of hope, Dimitri. 50% of the Cuban Americans who voted in Florida voted for Obama. So there may be a change in policy. But I think it's time all of us stood up and proudly endorse the concept of social insurance for the chronically disabled and for people 65 and older. And by the way, notwithstanding some Democrats that are talking this way, the last thing in the world we ought to do is raise the eligibility age for Medicare. You're 65 or 66 or 67. Go out there and try to find yourself health insurance. You won't get it from the insurance companies. Oh, they may give it to you, you know, $25,000 a year. I'm serious. They don't want to insure people at 65, 66. Best thing that ever happened to the insurance companies was Medicare, because they don't have to insure these folks. Do you imagine what your premiums would look like if the insurance companies were required to insure people 65 and older? That burden has been lifted off their backs, thereby significantly reducing premiums to the rest of us, because this government-financed insurance system picks up that burden. So the next time you hear Congressman Cantor or anyone else talk about how the bottom line to resolving this fiscal situation has got to be entitlement reform, we know what that means, folks. Less Social Security, less health care, and enormous economic problems that apparently Congressman Cantor doesn't know about or didn't learn in basic economics at wherever he went to undergraduate school. I'm not going to go on at any greater length because there are some very good people that we want to listen to, but I just find myself increasingly getting more and more annoyed at this stuff because these programs are the bedrock of this country and of our economic system, as well as our social system. And it isn't a handout. It's not something that we're giving to people because we want to give them charity. They've paid in over an extended period of time, as I say, under a very unfair taxing system. And I hope we can get rid of that word. Call it social insurance, call it whatever you want to call it, but let's have enough of this, you know, these people think they're entitled. That's the whole point of this. I don't know who came up with this. Probably the same guy that came up with pre-owned cars. Remember we used to call them used cars? Same kind of thing. Or consumer-driven health care. That's the one where you get a $10,000 deductible. You know, you get a buffalo policy, right? Covers you, but only if you're hit by a buffalo on Main Street at noontime. Otherwise, no cover. And I hope as we go into this important, but by no means critical period here, because it will be resolved one way or the other. And I hope and expect that the President's going to stand firm. He's gotten a mandate on this one, folks. I don't think there's any question about it. I hope we can stop talking about entitlements, start talking about social insurance, start talking about the importance of these commitments, not just for the people who benefit from them,